Hello, and welcome to Royale Without Cheese, our bi weekly podcast in which we discuss both the classic and the unknown of Hollywood and foreign cinema from the then and now. We are your hosts, me, Leonardo Miranda, Tomás, the Machine Ferreira,
Hello, hello.
and Miguel, the other machine, Aidu.
Hello there, welcome.
A City of Sadness is a 1989 Taiwanese historical drama directed by Hou Hsiao-hsien. It tells the story of a family embroiled in the White Terror that was wrought on the Taiwanese people by the Kuomintang government after their arrival from mainland China in the late 1940s. Considered by critics to integrate what would later be called the director's Taiwan trilogy at the time, A City of Sadness was one of few Taiwanese films to win the Golden Lion Award at the Venice Film Festival, and is often considered Xiao's masterpiece. The film was selected as a Taiwanese entry for the Best Foreign Language Film at the Academy Awards, but was not accepted as a nominee. However, how did it contend with the Royale Without Cheese jury committee? Any thoughts, boys? What are your thoughts?
I mean, it's a complicated film,
It is a
a
complicated
bit
film.
impenetrable if you have no historical context, like at all.
Yeah.
And even with historical context, still difficult
Mhm.
to truly grasp like the questions and the things that he's reflecting about and that he's discussing. So yeah, it's not a casual film that you throw in
No,
you know,
not
if
at
you're
all.
bored or if you don't know what to do. I'm gonna watch
If you don't know what to do,
Hsiao-hsien's film.
let's watch A City of Sadness.
I
What do
mean-
you think, Mike? Die Hard, City of Sadness? I'm feeling like a little bit of City of Sadness. Okay.
Something casual, you know.
Yeah, something casual. It's like this. To me, it's like starting with something simple, talking about the opening, for example. The opening, I think, is very interesting in contrast to the rest of the film. I think it has a setting of the tone and the contrast of the ambience of the film after Japan leaves Taiwan, because Taiwan for a very long time, 51 years, was a colony of Japan. Once the war ends, the very film starts with that Japan leaving, and you hear Emperor Hirohito's message of Japan leaving the war and leaving, Taiwan to his own devices. Then there's this period of political transition back to China's regime, or the Kuomintang government, which is really, I think, a right-wing government that was expelled from mainland China and then kind of made its own rule in Taiwan and started suppressing the leftist side of that existed in Taiwan. And it was the longest period of martial law. Martial law is when no civil liberties are being respected. You are under military rule, and was one of at the time in the 20th century, was the longest period of martial law that a country or a territory was under. So it was a big time of suppression of civil liberties, and that's what we witness in the film, as these families struggles with the ever changes that are happening in their country, because it's consistently, as the film showcases, these people on their daily basis, because it's not a film that has this intimate connection with the rooms of power or anything like that. It's not about all the president's men or whatever. It's a film about the daily lives of ordinary people and how they are, much like, let's say, in a Lovecraftian novel, where you would have these higher forces that are indifferent to you and that will exert their interests and power over human beings, regardless of their emotions, of what happens in their lives. The same way, in a very realistic way, happens, I think, in Chan's films. That's my way into it, to relate, because I kind of I like Lovecraft, and that's kind of how I see the film, in a weird way. I have this idea that comes from Lovecraft, a theme that he has. So I think, oh, this is interesting because this is the realistic version of it. You are seeing people living their daily lives. Normal things happen every day, like giving birth to a child. That's how the film opens. And yet things of a higher force are happening. Conditions of a strange matter are happening that are far beyond their reach and understanding and power to change. With militaries on the street beating people because they are negotiating cigarettes. That was kind of what started the February 28th incident, where a lot of civilians were maimed and killed over something that the government didn't agree with. I think it was a case of cigarette contraband. So that was
it was an issue back then.
It was
there was a lot
back
of
then.
contraband because of black market issues. I think because Japan or I'm not sure again. I don't know too much about the situation, but I think Japan had essentially like was using a lot of the resources that Taiwan had to, to improve its own economy first, and then the crumbs would be left for Taiwan. So the Taiwanese people, there would be a lot of contraband because these things were more inaccessible than
Yeah,
they should be.
exactly. Yeah, but in terms of stylistic terms, going back to the beginning, I love the fact at the beginning, given all of this political context I've been talking about, I love the fact that the beginning is shrouded in darkness, and it's like this living room, and there's this whole theme with light, and the baby's name is basically Light. That's what it is, when he gets born, and there's these lots of points of tension that are going on in the scene with his father. I think this is the story of four brothers really, and this is the eldest one that it owns this little bar called Little Shanghai, and the father is lighting these little candles across the room, and you have always, I think, what I find very interesting visually in this film, this is the first film I've seen from Hou Hsiao-hsien, is that you have lots of points of movement, of dramatic tension in the scene, with the father lighting the candles, trying to keep the house alive for what is happening, and in the background the family is embroiled in several things in housekeeping. All the while you hear the radio and the Emperor Hirohito, announcing the end of the Japan imposition in Taiwan. And at the same time, you have this baby cry. So in a weird way, in a weird poetic way, you have this outcry of life coming in, hope, from darkness to light. The literal scene after the credits is this living room full of light and a party and a very traditional thing of, I think they're burning money to wish of, good luck and prosperity for the family. So you have this real sense that things are going to get better. Yeah, that opening to me is very interesting and poetic in that form, because you have these various points of contention within these very still frames. And so in an overall comment, I really like how throughout the film, he really privileges the acting, and whatever emotion may come comes from the acting within the scene. And the camera is always very, very still in these wide shots that portray these wider political, social political context that really is the background to this family drama. All the while, it's the wideness of this family tapestry, because we're seeing the stories of these many different brothers and their conditions, and how do they, interact with the changings in their country. And that can be both the strength of the film, because they're really, connected with what the acting is presenting to you, and he doesn't really connect with, the camera, the point of view of the camera is so objective, it's so restrained, that he's not looking to express with any sweeping movements or close-ups the emotion within the characters' lives. So you're really just holding on to whatever emotional hook there is in the acting. Especially, I think what really functions in the film that is can be so, like I said, this can be the strength, but also can be the weakness, and has the weakness. To me, can be difficult to kind of like connect with what's going on from scene to scene, because also it's so elliptical. And so sometimes I don't understand, who is this character? What is the context now? Sometimes I have a little difficulty, although I understand the overall story. I think what the film has going on in terms of, best emotional hook is having this character of Wen Qing, who is a photographer and doctor, and is deaf. And I think he's the utmost kind of like emotional hook with the story, because his understanding of it all, of these higher forces, is the most impossible, because he can't hear people. And so you feel the most for him, and every scene he has with his best friend of his, who becomes his wife, I think, is very interesting, because you see the trading of messages between the two, and it kind of feels like a silent movie. I don't know if you have the same feel. It's kind of
like
it's a
title
very
cards.
very sweet moments where suddenly from dialogue you are conditioned to read things, so it feels like a secret told unexpectedly, where you are obliged to understand the deaf man. So there's a lot of humanity there in a film that is so difficult and cold, because of the atmosphere there is there of political repression. Yeah, so that's my take on it in general terms.
I mean, yeah, there
as per
were
the
a couple
visuals.
ideas that you just touched on. I think one of the most, like maybe one of the things that makes it more difficult is precisely that, the fact that sometimes you're thrown into scenes and the characters are discussing things that already happened, or we see the aftermath of events and not necessarily the events
Yeah,
themselves.
true.
There's a lot of telling, not a lot of showing, I guess, and that's like a running thing that I noticed with his films. But yeah, that's a challenge of his films, is that sometimes you have no idea. Not it's difficult to express. It's more that you're not sure what they're talking about or what's being discussed, and you're not sure how much you're supposed to understand of the
Yeah, and
situation
then by
narratively.
extension, I don't feel as invested sometimes. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't, and this unbalance between my investment, it becomes difficult because you're in this constant relationship of how do
Yeah.
I interact with this movie? How much investment do I put? I don't know. It's complicated. All the while, I feel this is a very unique take film that is presenting me a very specific cultural reality. But the very definition of it is difficult to present this to people who are not aware of it. But as well as that's what's interesting. I love films that present me different cultural realities in a time and space. So that is also its strength. But I think it's there's a strength and a weakness here in this
And it kind
elliptical
of
sense.
makes you question whether you read through the context correctly, because you go through so much things, and you're not sure exactly if you understand everything that they're talking about, and you go through, like, I mean, do I really understand everything that I'm supposed to understand historically as well? And is there something here that I missed that I should have known? Which, yeah, kind of makes it for a hard view, I think. And because the film is quite long, so
Yeah. I mean, it's formally challenging already because of the long takes and the distance, the objectivity. And then it's challenging historically because, I mean, I was doing a lot of Googling, like
Yeah, me
inevitably,
too.
like, what are they
Yeah,
talking
yeah,
about?
yeah, yeah.
Uh, and I think, I mean, the film definitely benefits if you do a little research beforehand and if you read up on these issues, but there's so much to read and so much to understand and different perspectives. It's something, I think it's a film that over the years for me will open itself up more as I have
Oh,
more
definitely. Over
understanding.
more rewatches,
Yeah,
it
for
will.
sure.
but I did enjoy the beginning, as Tomasz said, especially because, yeah, I mean, it does start with a sort of cold atmosphere, which kind of goes through the entire film. But the beginning with the fixing of the light, I think, is a really nice contrast. And the scene is really long, so it's a kind of very beautiful shot, I think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's a certain mystery about it. It's the
Yeah,
fact that
yeah.
it starts as well in media res. It's the middle of the action. You're thrown into it. You're trying to decipher things. It's kind of a simple thing to understand. And then you get to the historical ramifications of things, and then gangsters come into the situation with Shanghai connections. The Red Dragon fell, and I'm like, and when sometimes the Red Dragon fella comes in, sometimes he disappears, he comes back, and I'm like, where are we in this situation anymore? Like, what is
Yeah, yeah.
the context? It's a little bit hard to follow,
And the scene
but
itself is interesting because,
mhm.
I mean, the stillness and calmness of the light with the screaming of the woman, which is pregnant. I mean, it kind of goes. It's kind of an allegory for the whole film. I think, it's this sort of stillness which you think is happening with his family, but in the background you get a lot
Yeah,
of
yeah,
crazy,
exactly.
crazy shit happening.
Yeah, true. Yeah, the first scene is like I think establishes most of the ideas of the film in that way. In a sense, also you got the personal and the historical, as Tomasz was saying, like a birth, which is something super specific to a family, and then in the background, the Japanese letting go of Taiwan and handing it over to the KMT. So it's like immediately puts you in that
KGB.
puts you in that. Yeah, in that mindset that it's these two things will be extremely linked throughout the film, even
Yeah.
um, if the historical context is somewhat in the background. It's not discussed in the sense that a lot of historical dramas discuss them. As again, as Maj was saying earlier, you don't see the back rooms, you don't see the war room, you don't see all
Even the
these political
February
leaders.
28th, incident is
Yeah,
not shown. It's kind
exactly.
of reflected in backstage or in conversations,
It's
over the
mostly
radio, kind
aftermath.
of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's aftermath.
Yeah, the film is really committed to showing this family and this family alone,
yeah,
Yeah.
um, despite what's happening in the country.
And that's what comes back around to that idea of it is about ordinary life moving on normally and people having their worries, how I'm going to support my family, how I'm going to continue my business. This is as far as the older brother goes when Hung, I think, who owns Little Shanghai Bar. How does the other brother when Ching moves on with his business with photography, and his day-to-day, relationship with his best friend, who I very much believed at the beginning who was his wife already, because they have such a strong relationship.
I don't
So,
think no, they get married by the end. That's the story.
yeah, they get married by the end. Yeah, I know, no, but I always had the sense that they were
Ah,
already
okay,
married.
okay.
That
No,
kind
no.
of, because they were so strong together. But yeah, so it's always about that, like Miguel says, and it's how impressive that is. That these higher things are going on, and yet people's lives move on on a day-to-day basis, moment to moment, without reflecting.
I think that's what, for me, the film worked generally, even regarding the difficulties. So I think the end of the film is so powerful. That last shot, which is very, very normal. It's just them having, like, eating, having dinner.
Yeah.
And it's that shot behind, it's a frame within a frame. There's lots of that in the film. There's that voyeuristic feel.
Yeah.
But suddenly, with the whole film in your mind, it's that the life moving on, but you knowing that they're keeping quiet, like they're not discussing what just happened and what is now happening, which is the white terror or the martial law. And even the way that Hiromi talks about when Ching, he's been arrested. She sent a letter to his cousin or his sister, I don't remember, and she's saying, "Oh, he's been arrested. I haven't heard about from him in a while. I hope he's okay." Whereas, like, from the context of the film, you get, it's pretty obvious that, like, if he's not been executed yet, he will be very soon, because he's working with the leftist guerrilla of her brother, which were all executed, and they know that. So, when Ching be working with them, he'll probably get killed as well if he hasn't yet. But the way she speaks of it in a very calm manner, it's almost like there's that sense of trying to not address reality and, holding on to hope. That is, that is something that you understand in the context of the release of the film, which is in 1989. Suddenly, finally, they're talking about this. They're talking about the White Terror and the incident.
Up until 87, they were under the regime, I think. So
exactly. And it was something that everybody knew in the background. Everybody sort of acknowledged that had happened, and so many people died. But it was, you weren't supposed to talk about it, and nobody really did. They just kept living, but there was that unspoken thing in the background that everybody knew about. And so in 89, I think that context makes the ending of the film even more poignant and relevant in that sense, that it's communicating that idea of staying quiet.
Also, like how he approaches violence, because it's very much in the same style as he approaches everything else. There's this normalcy to it. These strange acts happen every day. Whether it is violence amongst these gangsters and the family, or violence from the government against the civilians, people. And you have this scene at the bar. I've never seen such a fight scene filmed this way. I was kind of very impressed. That you have Wen Leung, which is one of the youngest brothers. He was at the hospital. He's the one who suffers from mental health reasons. He gets involved with the gangsters in contraband. That's not very good in terms of what the KMT thinks about it. And his family reproaches him. He starts a fight with the gangster that I think rats him out. And the fight ensues onto the streets, and you have this massive wide shot where you can barely see the action up close in any nuance or detail. They're just little dots at the bottom of the frame, and you see these houses, gathering above them, of the whole of the neighborhood. And I thought, like, this is such a different way to kind of think of a fight scene. So such a, at the most detached possible. You could have various degrees of a wide shot, but you chose to do this. And I'm always wondering, what led him to do this this way. I think it's in the manner of, violence occurs every day, and this is no different. There's kind of a normalcy to it.
And also,
did any of you thought,
I think
what did
for
you
me
think
it
of
communicated like the insignificance of it all in the context of the film, of the historical. I mean, it's little violences, little like pettinesses, little things. You have to be in the mindset of knowing what's coming before for that to really register. But it's sort of like, communicated that idea of, they're fighting over this thing, but like in a week, I don't know how long, like this won't matter that much because they'll be under martial law. There'll be a massacre. There'll be so much happening.
Yeah.
And even like the death of Jung, the restaurant owner, which happens also very
And it's by gangsters, right? I think
I
it's
think
also
so, yeah. In the it just pulls out a gun and shoots him. You don't even see the gun.
you don't even see the gun or
Yeah, it's
from
like,
where he's shot.
and it's some. I think it's some old guy, very casual. Just kills him. Like, fuck this guy. But yeah, again, another death that is another moment of violence that is sort of underplayed. I think it's more to communicate the desperation of the character. I think he's super drunk, just picking fights with everyone, and sort of for a moment of stupidity, he gets killed in a bar.
Yeah. Another lovely scene is the scene that surprised me was between Wen Qing and his friend. While he's serving this, I don't really understand why he's serving this group of men. I mean, he's a photographer, but he is what is happening there. You know, they are gathering in his living room, like they came into his studio like clients, but then they
Yeah.
are eating, like they're lunching
Yeah,
there
and
or
he's
something.
preparing
Right?
the
Like,
meal. I'm not sure about that either. But I know they're discussing politics, they're discussing
yeah.
the situation. You understand that they're leftists. But
Mm-hmm.
I think what I liked about that scene, and maybe it's what you were gonna reference, is how it
Yeah.
ends. Hiro and Wen Qing pull aside and they listen to some music.
Exactly. That
Yeah,
was I
it's
thought it
really
was
beautiful.
lovely. But it was a pity that the action of them, the other men gathered at the table, speaking, talking together, kind of fades away. You stop listening to them actually talking. And I thought, well, let them continue talking and let these two have their own conversation. I find that would be interesting. Why, if you notice, the conversation stopped. You see a body there, but they're not talking anymore. It's like the director
I mean, it's
made
just-
this mistake of like what the action stopped there.
I mean, it's just that happens in films all the time. I mean, you can
It's a bit
this
weird.
debate whether you should do that or not, but it's like you just remove the conversation from
Oh, for sure,
the
you know, I mean-
subjectiveness of the film. Like subjectively, we're just listening to them too. The other guys are still talking, but we don't hear them.
Yeah, but the thing is, they stopped talking completely. There's not like a little murmuring in the background, which I would
I mean,
prefer.
yeah. I would maybe that would make more sense. That's like a sound option, maybe, or just you said I don't care about those guys anymore. Let's stay with the couple.
Because the beauty to me would be if those guys are
it's
still
not
talking,
naturalistic.
and these two are having an intimate moment together, nevertheless, and exchanging this song that is completely different from their culture. It's from Germany, talking about a mermaid. I don't remember very well. It's kind of a folk
like a
tale
folk,
thing.
folk thing.
And I just thought it was kind of very sweet and strengthened the relationship that they had together because it was something to do with something very oral that he himself cannot hear, and she's explaining it to him through another medium of words, which is in writing form.
Yeah, I mean the whole issue of communication in the film is also one of the crucial things. Like, and there's nuances that I don't even understand because there's the question of the language itself and the different dialects, and there's moments where I'm sure that plays a role, but I don't understand the language, so like it doesn't speak to me that way. But there is the one that is obvious is the fact that he's mute and he can't speak, so he writes. And there's lots of writing and him telling people things through writing. Like there's a moment where he's telling his wife, like retelling what happened with her brother in the guerrilla area and why he came back to her. He tells her the whole discussion, but there's also a moment where he's talking to a friend of his because when Qing was imprisoned and he was with someone who then got executed, who happens to be the brother of someone who's also in the guerrilla with his best friend. And so then you see him inside that flashback, like writing and telling his that person about his brother that was executed. So there's like lots of retelling and lots of him writing, and I think like it almost reaches a sort of a metatextual level because it's like the act that Hou Hsiao-hsien is doing himself with this film is sort of retelling something that wasn't spoken and so like there's all these layers of something being retold and retaught and spoken again. And I think, I mean, it brings the dynamic that is sort of its strength and can be a bit difficult to truly enter the film sometimes because it's not an easy film, as I said a bunch of times already.
I do think the film could be, this is always to do with artistic choice, but I think the film could, take advantage of some narrative economy, being shorter. I think this in 2 hours would be fine.
Take
2
advantage
hours
of
and a half.
narrative economy.
Oh my God.
I mean, 2 hours and a half. Why not 2 hours? I'm just saying.
It's like that's like when you said that News from Home should be like a short. That's crazy.
I wasn't wrong.
You are unbelievably
you
wrong.
could easily do the
I mean,
concept
you
in one
could
short
you
film.
could do anything as a short. It would
Yeah,
just
for
be
sure.
worse.
Yes, but there are just films that I think, what demanded this to be 3 hours? Sometimes, for example, there are films that I think 3 hours, yes, 2 hours, yes, I get it.
Yeah,
But sometimes personally, I feel this is very personal. This is not objective, of course.
I agree with. Yeah,
I'm not saying, look, Shao,
but I
you're gonna
usually
stop this
I
bullshit.
I usually
I'm not
think
gonna say
that of like blockbusters because I think
There
the
you go,
goals
you
are
see?
the goals are different. You know, like a film like this, yeah, it could be shorter, but also I don't hold it against the filmmaker. But yeah, like a
It's
blockbuster
less
or a Marvel film.
focused, so maybe it
For
could be
sure,
shorter.
yeah. But just because it's less plot focused doesn't mean that Sometimes I'm watching things that I think perhaps this could be a little shorter, and it wouldn't hurt the story or the overall environment or the overall atmosphere. There is already that has already this malaise.
Especially because of that, I think. Because the atmosphere built so much of the film already. You don't really
so it's
need to further it more.
But I'm not gonna.
What would you cut? Come
hack
on,
his head off.
let's get practical. Let's get practical.
What
would you
wouldn't I
cut?
cut?
What wouldn't you cut?
What would I cut?
Would you cut the bird flying?
There's so much that I don't remember. I cannot tell exactly what.
You are unqualified.
There you go. I will need to watch the film a second time, a third time over time to really both get more of a connection with it, like you said, and more of an understanding of the nuances, and at the same time say, "Oh yeah, this could be taken out." Write a letter to Shao. That film he did in '89.
This 5 to 10 minutes out.
Yeah,
cut it.
out. Cut it. Yeah.
I mean,
want a fee for this, by the way.
on that note, I was really annoyed the fact that the film is not like the film was recently restored, like literally in February on the anniversary of the incident. There were some showings in China and in that area, Hong Kong, Taiwan, mainland, of the restored version, and there's a trailer online that you can see, and it looks like beautiful. And so then when I started watching the film, I was like, wait, this looks a bit
Exactly. I felt
foggy.
the same thing. I was watching the film and I was like, it would be so good if there was a restored version of this.
But
because
it's
it
not
doesn't look that
online
good.
yet.
Yeah.
Hopefully soon. And that is all for today. If you'd like to reach out and suggest a film for the next episode, you can find us on the podcast official Instagram and Facebook pages. Don't forget to subscribe, share the episode, or simply give us a like. That's how our podcast can grow ever more groovy. Thanks for listening and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye there.
Bye.